This is Coach Aaron Saft in the Runningpains podcast, and I've got a number of topics to cover today. Kind of a melting pot of topics to go through. One was a question that came in. That was a great question, so I thought it was worth putting into the podcast. And then dealing with mental fatigue. I know I go through it. I know everybody goes through it, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons we face this mental fatigue, as well as how to avoid it, and if you are feeling mentally fatigued, some things you can do about it. And lastly, we're going to get into the taper. We are getting into that time of year where we have a ton of events happening, and a lot of you are probably, if not already in your taper, are about to taper. So I thought it would be a relevant topic to kind of talk about. So let's start out with our question. Ron has some really great questions that he emails me. He's one of my Patreon supporters. So Ron, thank you for supporting on the Patreon level. And this was a great question because as it heats up, here we are, in the spring, getting into the summer, temperatures are rising. Ron asked about heart rate. Obviously, heart rate elevates with heat. So our average pace is going to be lessened by the heat if we're looking at our heart rate. In order to keep our heart rate at the level it should be when we're running in the heat, we have to decrease our pace. So Ron had asked, when we get into the summer months, do I still focus on the pace or do I monitor my heart rate? And again, the answer being you want to continue to monitor your heart rate. You want to continue to run at the same heart rate or intensity of heart rate for that given workout. Okay, so we can't sustain the same paces because then it's elevating the heart rate. We're still getting the same workload, even though the pace isn't the same. Our heart is getting the same benefit. Our cardiovascular system, everything is getting the same benefit of the workout if we keep it managed at the right heart rate for the workout. So once it starts to cool down again, you'll notice that your paces are going to be fast again. Okay, so it really is just the heat. Okay, and we'll probably have a separate episode on the heat and dealing with the heat, training through the heat, all that kind of stuff. But it was a great question, Ron. So wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page because as it heats up here, paces are going to slow down, and that's okay. They should. As it's hot. Want to maintain that same kind of heart rate, that same perceived effort, if you will. Okay, so thank you, Ron, again for the question. Appreciate that. So far as mental fatigue goes, this is, kind of one that it can be, caused by a number of things. Sometimes we look at as motivation is waning. We're not as excited to go out and train, or not as excited by a race or whatever it may be. And sometimes that can come from just over racing. You race too frequently. Okay, if you're racing all the time, that takes a lot of mental and physical energy. So it's going to take a lot more recovery. And, just like with physical recovery, if you're not mentally recovering, you're going to continue to kind of slide down that mental fatigue avenue, if you will. So keep that in mind. And when you're recovering from your races, if you're not ready to train yet mentally, you may be physically ready, but maybe you're not ready mentally. Give yourself a little bit more time. Okay, allow yourself that recovery mentally so that you're excited by training again. It can also happen when volume is really high. If you're in your maximum volume phase, it gets really taxing and draining to keep it up. I'm in that phase of training myself right now, and I'm recording this podcast and just trying to gather myself to go out and get my run in. It's a few other things are going on. We could talk about those later. Just been having a tough few days here, but we'll talk about that later. Again, if your training volume is high, you just have to be mindful. Okay, and we're going to talk about some tips if you're feeling this mental fatigue of what you can do. But know that that's a normal thing. If you're into your fourth week of your max volume phase and you're starting to feel that mental fatigue, that's totally normal. And again, we'll talk about some things that can help. Have you been training for too long? Okay, that's another piece of this puzzle that can be a problem. Sometimes we don't take a break. We don't allow the body that recovery. You may be training, for an event, and it's just the training cycle went too long. A typical training cycle is about 16 weeks, maximum of 24, depending on what the goal is, how long you've been training, all that good stuff. There's a lot that goes into how many weeks you should be training for an event. But if you go beyond that, it starts to create more fatigue on the system. The body needs a break. The mind needs a break. So, look at your calendar. How long have you been training? Does the body and mind need a break? That's another good question to ask yourself and to assess. Okay. Of course, if you're not getting enough sleep, that can really compound problems and make you mentally fatigued. We all, if we haven't gotten enough sleep, wake up groggy. We all know that feeling. Now, if it's constant, again, it's going to create more and more fatigue. So be wary of how much sleep you're getting, okay? Focus on getting some rest. And you can also be too stressed. If there's too much going on in your life, right? And training just seems like another thing at the moment that you're just like, well, how do I have time for that? Running becomes a stress. It already is a stress on the body. I mean, literally, running, we always talk about how it is a stress. Stress is stress. But if you're feeling extra stress just because of maybe, something's going on at work or, family obligations, whatever it may be, that's something you need to consider and figure out how you can resolve that, which, again, we'll kind of go over some of this in a bit here. But how can you avoid mental fatigue? Well, some of it's obvious. As I said earlier, kind of make sure you're ready to return to running mentally and physically after a race. Okay, give yourself enough time to make sure you're recovered and ready to train again. You can train the brain, and there's a few things that you can do here. And this isn't my specialty, my strength, but here's some things that I do, and we may have somebody else on the podcast at some point that can kind of help us here on how to strengthen and train the brain. But two tools that I use, two resources, two books actually that I use is Addie Bracy's Mental Training for Ultrarunning. I think that's a fantastic resource with a number of different exercises throughout the book that kind of help you work through some of these situations. Okay, so Addie Bracy's book, Mental Training for Ultrarunning, and the other one is Travis Macy's Ultra Mindset. That one as well has some exercises and some things that you can go through to try to work through some of this, mental fatigue and see where it's coming from. So two good books to look into. Okay, I'll put those in the show notes. And then either learning to meditate or meditating, if you already know how to do so. Meditation really helps us process a lot and kind of helps us learn what our mental state is and what our physical state is. What is our current being? How are we doing? It's kind of a self-check. So, meditating is great in that. And obviously it's another thing that you have to kind of add to the day and make a habit, which is, it can be tough to add one more thing to the day. I totally get it, but it's worth its while. Okay, so meditation. Other things you can do is communicate with your team. You may have a coach that you can talk to about this, motivation. This all stemmed because I have an athlete that's, was mentally fatigued. And, this whole conversation this episode that I'm talking on here, that's where it's stemming from. We had a good conversation, an honest conversation. And, we kind of pinpointed where it was coming from. Why was this mental fatigue taking place? And, what should we do about it? So, our conversation really helped this athlete move forward and kind of refresh himself, get his motivation back. So that was great. If you don't have a coach, talk to your training partner, talk to your spouse, try to pinpoint where is this mental fatigue coming from? What can you do about it? Okay. And then offload every now and again. And what I mean by offload is take a day off, take some time off, cross train instead, or add a new stimulus. Maybe go to the gym, do a Stairmaster, or do a core workout. Add something new that varies up the training, that perhaps will bring some motivation back to your training. Of course, this one's kind of self-evident. Get more sleep. I hesitate to say that we all get enough sleep. I doubt that's the case. I know in my circumstances, I definitely don't get enough sleep. It's hard right now. I get it. My day is jam packed. It's, I wake up, I start work early, start working on my athletes' schedules. Sometimes it's 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. I'm working on the schedules. And then by 6:30 a.m., I'm getting the kids up, getting them ready to school. I have, the kids to school by 8 a.m. I come home, walk the dog, go for my run. And then, more work on the, my athlete schedules. I have athlete calls all the way up until the track practice, which I get there for 2:30, and then I'm usually there till 5:30. Okay, and then from there, I take the kids home. I usually have to unpack their lunches, clean up from their day, clean up the house a little bit, sometimes prepare dinner, check on my athletes in Training Peaks. It's nonstop. So I get it. It's hard to find time in your day. It's hard to get the sleep in because you have so much going on. That's my typical day. And I'm going until 9:30 at night. There's hardly any time to just sit down and relax. So I get that. Being able to sleep or to, find downtime, and especially trying to add something to that schedule, sometimes it's just impossible and it overwhelms us. So I get that. I understand it. Believe me, I do. But if we can get more sleep, it will certainly help. The other thing we can do is plan out our racing season a little bit more so that, obviously it's well in advance. We give ourselves months in advance of what races we're doing. And does the build make sense? Are we doing races that will build us in the best possible way to get us to our goal race healthy and ready to run? A lot of times our racing's all over the place. We kind of throw in distances just because we want to race. Like, I get it. There's some awesome races out there. And you also have to determine, okay, is my goal race, is it big enough that, if I do some other races that don't really make sense, and by this, I mean, sometimes we'll race, a 50 miler, and then, we'll throw in a 50K, and then we'll throw in, a 125K, or, whatever it may be. But we kind of just go up and down and undulate in our training, and just kind of throw in too much, which obviously adds to the fatigue, like we talked about earlier. So make sure your racing season makes sense. Talk with a coach about it, or talk with your training partner about it. Again, use your team. Make sure, write it all out on a calendar. Look at it. Is there enough time between that you can recover? Is there enough time that you can still train, okay, with all the recovery that you have to take? Make sure that makes sense, okay, because you don't want to get burnt out, and especially you don't want to get injured, okay? Some people don't have a goal race. They just like to race all the time. I get that. But again, you have to plan in your breaks, okay? So, in planning your races, that also means planning in your breaks. When are you going to give the body a rest? So that you don't get injured, you don't get burnt out, you don't get fatigued, you don't have this mental fatigue. So planning is huge. Make sure you take time to plan out your season. Okay? All right. So if you are mentally fatigued, what can you do? Well, first, I would try to find the root of the problem. What caused this? Why are you having this mental fatigue? What is going on? That, you're just really drained, you're not motivated, you don't want to get out there. So if you can pinpoint that, kind of determine, well, is this partly physical or is it solely mental? If it's partly physical, perhaps you need a little bit more time off, okay? And that doesn't have to be long. It could be 2 days. It could be 3 days. Maybe it's a week. But, depending on the level of fatigue, and is it combined with mental and physical fatigue, then, you have to determine what should you do. And perhaps the answer is to take some downtime. Or cross-train. If you don't want to lose the fitness, hop in the pool, go for a swim, hop on the bike, go for a ride. Okay, there's other options to make sure that you're still getting in some aerobic work without losing much fitness, but you're kind of taking that break from running. And at this time, if you're feeling it, it's a good time to revisit your why. This is something that, Addie Bracy goes over in her book. Is your why strong enough? Like when you look at it, now that I'm kind of thinking about my why for the races coming up, I realize, my why is strong enough, and I do need to get out there. And so, just taking that moment to step back and looking at your why, be like, oh yeah, this is definitely worth me going out there and running today. So make sure that why is strong enough. So when you revisit it, if it's not, then you need to reestablish it, strengthen that why, change it. Okay. Also revisit the books I mentioned. Okay. This is a great time if you're feeling that mental fatigue to go into those books. Again, Mental Training for Ultra Running by Addie Bracy and Ultra Mindset by Macy. Okay, this is a great time to go through those, and they can walk you through revisiting your why as well as other activities that can help you kind of establish where your mental fatigue is coming from and how you can move forward. Okay. And then lastly, you need to prioritize and simplify. Okay, prioritize what is important in your life. You may be overwhelmed. And that's what I was talking about earlier when the day is just jam-packed. Today, I prioritized recording this podcast. The podcast comes out tomorrow. So when you're listening to this, I recorded on Wednesday, and it is coming out on Thursday. So I prioritized this because I knew I'd have it hanging over my head, and on my run, all I would be thinking about is recording this podcast. Whereas when I want to go for my run, I just want to go for a run and relax and not think about what I have to do. So I prioritize doing this, and then I'll get my run in. So how can you simplify your life? What are some extraneous things that you do that take away from your time and kind of, are a time suck, in other words? Could be, I spend too much time on social media or on my phone, watching videos, whatever. It can be, I watch too much TV, I can be guilty of that. So, when you think about these things, that are draining your time, how can you use them more efficiently? And sometimes you need that stuff, though. I get it. Really, you need that time to unwind, and if that's how you unwind, you need to make sure that that's you have time to do that. Prioritize that, because we do need that relaxing, but we have to find that balance, right? Like in order to get everything we need to get done, how much time extra do I have to do those things, right? So prioritize, make a list of what you have to do and how important they are to get done. And then add what you want to do, and do you have time for it? So prioritize and simplify. So I hope that helps with mental fatigue. As I said, it happens to the best of us. It happens to all of us. It's tough sometimes to get out there and to keep training because we're just tired. We're tired of the daily routine, the grind sometimes. It's rough. I get it. So, and if you need to talk, give me a holler. It's great. Like if you want to talk about some of these things, fire me an email. Like let's chat about your race schedule. Let's chat about your training. Let's just have a conversation about these things. I'm happy to help, for sure. So that will bring us into our last topic, which is the taper. Okay, the taper. A lot of times, the taper, sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes your training is just going really well and you're feeling good. You don't necessarily have to taper. I think that's a common misconception. If you're feeling good, you may just taper off a little bit. Okay, you may just kind of reduce volume just slightly. You may not even have to. You may just feel great going into race day. And it also depends on the race. We have mini tapers, and I'll talk about mini tapers, and those are for your B and C goal races, right? We're talking about for your A goal race, tapering for an A goal race at the moment. So, typically, if I'm to give some guidelines, this is kind of just a general rule of thumb for tapering. And again, it really depends on how you're feeling. So, the big proponent here, and I'll mention it time and again in this conversation, is to listen to your body. Okay, listen to your body. So, typically for a race that's 5K to half marathon, you're looking at about perhaps a 1 week taper. If you're tapering for a marathon, perhaps 1 to 2 weeks, again, depending on the training cycle, depending on how tired you are and how much you need to kind of recover from the whole training cycle. We really don't want to have to taper too much. That's the reality. If you're listening to your body, you're not going to push it to the fact where we need a ton of time to taper. that means that you overtrained. Okay, so be careful. If you're in your maximum volume phase and you're really, really getting tired, that means you're really, really going to have to taper. So be careful. Pull back a little bit. You don't have to be tired all the time. You shouldn't be tired all the time. Training should feel pretty good. Okay. Now, if we're talking distances of 50K to 50 mile, and this is an approximation, we're talking probably about a 2-week taper. And anything 100K plus, you were talking 2 to 3 week taper. Again, general rules of thumb for how long to taper. Now, what do you do in a taper? Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is you want to include quality. So you want to include workouts still. You still want to be doing some speed or some lactate threshold, tempo, steady state running. Okay. You still want to do that, but you want to reduce the volume. Okay. And by volume, it can be a few things. Reduce the volume and the amount of reps you're doing in your speed sessions. Reduce the volume of your tempo and steady state runs. Okay, so we're reducing the volume there, as well as reducing the overall volume of your week. Okay, and we're looking at an overall reduction of about, I would say each week, about 20 to 30% of your weekly volume. You're going to reduce. Okay, and that could be on the high side. Again, listen to your body. How is it feeling? There it is again. Do you need to reduce that much? Do you need to reduce on the higher side, or can you go on the lower side? You're trying to find that balance, right? To keep you where you're still feeling fresh, but you're not feeling too lethargic. And that's kind of the next point. Is when I took the Lydiard Foundation certification, they talk about balancing the scales. On the one side, you can feel sluggish, right? We want to keep the scales balanced. So how do we counteract feeling sluggish? Well, in order to counteract that, your body needs stimulation. What's going to stimulate a sluggish body is doing some speed and throwing in some intervals or some surges, right? Doing a little bit of fartlek, kind of turning the legs over. Some longer surges, 30 seconds to 1 minute is fine. Just something to stimulate that nervous system to kind of re-energize the body and get it moving again, because it's just it feels probably rote from just doing, plain old boring miles. So, incorporating strides into your week still, that's great. That gives the stimulation. Again, throwing in some fartleks, just keep that body moving, especially when it feels sluggish. Now, on the other side of the scale, you're feeling too good. You're feeling fast, nimble, like you can take on the world. You feel invincible, and you just crushing the work, and you want to run fast. That's when you need to add more volume. Okay, so that will kind of, if you will, bring you back or tip the scale back to where you're on even keel, right? We want to stay even keel. We don't want to feel too good too early. So adding the volume will bring that back to a normal level, if you will. Okay, so that you have to manage that. And again, that's by listening to your body. How's it feeling? What should you do on that given day? The schedule may call for one thing, but you may not be doing that day. And during the taper, it is extremely important that you do exactly what your body is telling you, not what your schedule is telling you. And again, talk to your coach, right? Let them know. I was feeling a bit sluggish today. I threw in some surges. I'm always okay with that. Or I was feeling a little too good today. I added on, a mile and a half. Totally fine. Totally fine. I get it. They're trying to balance the scale. Okay, so any coach that knows you and understands you, they're going to just kind of put it in your hands. My track athletes, I've said to them, how do you feel today? What do you feel you should do today? Some are like, I'm just going to go run easy. Others are like, I need a few strides. They get it. I'm telling them and I'm teaching them to listen to their bodies. And in this point, they're in their taper. They're in their championship season. I trust them enough that they know what their bodies are telling them. So they're doing what they feel, or they are, what their body is telling them they should do. And that's the way you need to be. Okay. Now, on your quality sessions, make sure they're not too hard. Again, you may be feeling really good. You're in your taper. You're feeling fresh. Make sure they're not too fast. Don't put your race effort into your workouts. don't go over that like 90%, right? Don't overwork it. Leave something for race day, right? A lot of times when you're tapering and you're feeling so good, all of a sudden you're running your best workouts of the season, but that diminishes what you can do on race day. So be really mindful of how hard you're going in your workouts. Again, you may be feeling really good, and that's good, but be mindful of how hard you go. Watch yourself, okay? Don't run too hard, especially on your quality sessions and your runs, your regular everyday runs, okay? In this taper, be careful of your caloric intake. If you are decreasing your volume, now your caloric demand is lower. Don't sustain how much you're eating. Be careful. We're so used to indulging because our mileage is so high, but now we're not doing that mileage, so you're going to pick up a little extra weight. So it's common race week. Now, again, this is not my specialty. I am not a dietitian. Okay. So you have to be mindful. It's probably something you could talk to with somebody about. Okay. So if I reduce this much, what's my caloric needs? What do I need to do? Okay. But that's something to be very mindful of. Take care of the other little things. Again, sleep is vital during this time. Hydration, all of those things, they're super vital during this time. So take care of the little things. Also, if you've been doing strength training, it's a time to reduce your strength training. At this time in the taper, I typically only include core and mobility work, and it's very light. Okay, it may just be a simple plank session. Okay, or just a mobility routine. Jesse Fuller shared with me a great mobility routine. So I typically prescribe one mobility session and one core session. You're just doing maintenance right now, just because the body's used to it. But it's time to take out your strength training. Okay. And then lastly, I'm just going to reiterate: listen to your body. What does it need? What does it want? And that's not just with training. Listen to it's, if it's asking you for something, food wise, if it's tired, do you need sleep? Listen to it. Give it what it needs. That's the biggest thing. Okay. I mentioned the mini taper. Okay. The mini taper, the same things apply here, except you're not reducing volume by much. Okay. You don't have to reduce volume by as much as you do in your taper for your goal event. We're only talking here perhaps like 10% at most of a reduction of the volume. Okay. We're training through this. We want you to feel good in the race, but you don't have to reduce as much as you did for your goal race. Okay. So in a mini taper, you can reduce the volume a bit. Perhaps that week, you just do some strides. You don't do a workout per se. Again, depending on your goal for this B or C race. But listen to the body. Again, it's, is it okay with doing a workout? You don't want to overdo it. So that's why I hesitate to say, add a workout. It's better just to do some strides that week, just kind of give the body some stimulus and then let the race be the big workout for the week. Okay, so in a mini taper, still can reduce some volume, maybe up to 10%, and then your quality sessions, just add a session of strides. There's also the reverse taper, when you taper up to an event. So perhaps you had an illness or an injury that kind of sidelines you. And so you have to build back. So your volume is actually going up towards your goal event, whereas normally at that time it would be going down. The volume would actually be decreasing. You may actually increase towards your event if you need to build some fitness back and you have the time to do it. Remember, it takes about 2 weeks for any kind of stimulus to kind of give us a direct benefit. So, if you're, 6 weeks out, 4 weeks out, you're still going to gain some benefit by adding some volume back. Now, the careful thing here, and this is probably saved for another episode, is you don't want to build back too quickly. You don't want to add too much too quickly, and that's why I say it's kind of a gradual increase in building volume back into it, but that would be a reverse taper, okay? So, perhaps we'll do a whole other episode on the reverse taper because I think it's worth talking about more in depth and getting into the intricacies of the reverse taper. But that's what I have for the conversation today, the episode today. I hope you can pull some stuff away from it. If you have any questions on the episode or anything I went over, please reach out to me. All my contact information is in the show notes. Happy to hear from you. I really appreciate everybody and for being a part of this and listening. Again, for supporting at the Patreon level, for sharing the episodes. I want to thank you guys for being a part of the MR Runningpains podcast. So far as my coaching world goes, I can take on a few new clients here. It's that transitional time of year where people are finishing up a goal race. So, it's been kind of nice because I've had a few people finish up their goal races and they're taking a break from coaching. And then I've had some new people come on. So it's been a perfect mash this point. So if you're interested in talking about coaching, please reach out. Again, all my contact information is in the show notes. Once again, I thank you guys for being a part of this. Look forward to our next conversation. I appreciate the feedback too. I got a lot of notes that everybody enjoyed the episode with John Goldfield, as I did. I'm going to try to do some more of those conversations as well. I really enjoy them myself. It's kind of refreshing and hearing from the athletes and hearing their stories. But I also like these episodes because I feel like I can get some information out there and perhaps help you in your training goals. So I thank you guys, and I hope you have a great week. Enjoy your running. Those that are running Hellbender, I wish you the best of luck. There's so much coming up. We got Cruel Jewel next weekend. I've got a bunch of athletes racing both Hellbender and Cruel Jewel. So good luck to all of you that are running those races, as well as Quest for the Crest. That's coming up as well. So a lot of cool Southeast races happening in the next 2 weeks. If you're running or racing, I wish you the best. So thank you, my friends. And until next time, keep running.